Welcome to the latest episode of Care Points. I'm your host, Kenny Schiff, Director of Analytics for Lone Star Communications. Today's episode is part of my continuing series of conversations with notable folks in the healthcare industry, my collaborators at Lone Star, partners, customers, and other interesting folks. It's my pleasure to interview Myron Wallace, founder of Cirkel Consulting Group. Let me tell you a little bit about Myron. For the last 20 years, Myron has been a driving force behind revolutionary business solutions across many telecom and pivoting into the communication services in healthcare. He's built and led teams in developing next-gen collaboration products for those industries at some of the most respected companies in the industries, including Halo, which is now part of Simple, Tiger Connect, all hyper-growth firms whose focus has been on transforming concepts into commercial success. His achievements include creating a collaboration solution during COVID, launching multiple cloud communication platforms globally, and pioneering many technology firsts. He's always been on the edge of things and passionate about innovation. Welcome, Myron.
Thanks, Kenny. It's great to be here.
So let me set up the episode. So I brought Myron into the conversation because he has a lot to contribute on the mobile communications front in healthcare especially. And mobile devices have been making their way into hospitals for, going back to the 50s with a lot of momentum since the advent of meaningful use in 2009. What makes hospitals unique and different than other industries is that there's a lot of deskless workers that dominate the workforce. And now, for the last 15 or so years and longer, electronic medical records entities like Epic and Cerner are driving smartphone adoption. It's been going on for a while, but now it's really picking up. And I think it's safe to say that the days of proprietary, purpose-built mobile communicators is kind of on the way out. So with that in mind, I'm bringing Myron into the conversation. I'm going to ask him a bunch of questions about his experience and his perspective on the industry. So Myron, you and I have touched on all sides of the hospital's communications ecosystems. It'll be valuable to give our listeners your perspective on the mobile device integration journey, especially with the angle of digital transformation. And as noted in the setup, I'm particularly interested in exploring how Epic is driving device rollout, and especially when somebody had a pre-existing solution that had worked for them, like a Vocera or a Connexall and some combination of nurse call platform like Rollout or purpose-built devices from companies like Spectralink or Ascom. So it'd be good to discuss that, but also device and platform selection, how that plays into future decisions about messaging, telecom in general, the whole alert ecosystem, and of course, your point of view on how to get ready, how to scale and sustain, and to get the most impact and ROI. So let's start by asking you the big question. What's working in the new world, and what don't we have right yet?
Well, thanks, Kenny. I think there's a lot of choices to make when you're trying to navigate the landscape of devices, and what you said about, purpose devices is, health systems are looking at, how do we consolidate multiple applications onto a device, and then, how do they make these ecosystems talk to one another? A lot of systems exist in the four walls, and they have for many years, but we live in a modern time where things come from the cloud through Amazon, Google, Microsoft. All these public clouds are out there, and how do we get there securely? And then how do we, most importantly, select the device that's going to work with our environment? Long gone are the days of you have ASCOM devices, cordless phone technologies. They get rolled out. They have dedicated, just think of it as a highway, for that device to communicate on. You can't just roll out a smart device and it suddenly works. There's a lot of things that go into it. Does the Wi-Fi network work correctly? Is there enough access points? Do we have the right security in place from a firewall perspective? Because we live in an unfortunate time where cyber is become more prevalent, and we have to make decisions about how do we secure the enterprise. So there's a lot of factors at play here.
And the tendency is for people to gravitate towards the device, a particular device they like, they have experience with, but there are so many things that it's attached to that it's probably the place that the folks making decisions are the most vulnerable, right? Because they're not they don't have access to all the information they need about how it all goes together.
Well, I think the one thing that's always perplexed me in the industry is, Epic's stance with iPhones. Everyone loves the iPhone. I'm an iPhone user. No one likes a green text message. It's kind of my joke, right? But at the end of the day, people think, hey, it's an iPhone. It works. It's easy to use. It's intuitive. Let's put it in a clinical environment. Well, that's great, but it's not really meant for that. That's not what Apple originally engineered that product for. They engineered it for a consumer use case and maybe, business use case. So the purpose-built hardware from, the Zebras, the Spectralinks of the world, those devices were made for healthcare. They can go in a clinical environment. They can be wiped down. They have different support tools that you just can't get on a iPhone. And, that's a big challenge for organizations to realize, how do we navigate this? I mean, it's gotten a lot better. So I give the industry credit for, fixing problems with the iPhone to make it work proper with Wi-Fi inside of, healthcare environments, but it's still not purpose built. You can't wipe the thing down with the sanitation cloths, and expect the device to last 5 years. It just won't happen. The secondary thing is when people see iPhones laying around, they tend to grow legs and walk out the front door. And, not everyone realizes that they're locked down and whatnot. So
let's branch off into two different kind of side roads regard to that. So one is iPhone is sexy. They have such incredible brand awareness. Politics may be such, or demand may be such, that the organization doesn't decide to go with a purpose-built device. So what does an organization like that do in order to ensure that they have a sustainable solution?
I think it really comes down to, the device management platform that controls the device, because, you can't just grab a phone, hand it out to the clinical enterprise, as I refer to it, and it suddenly be ready to go. It has to get onboarded with the proper, device management solutions in the background. And, there are cases that get selected, to put a scanning engine on the back of it if you want to be able to scan barcodes and whatnot for, patient validation as well as meds administration inside the organization. So there's things that, can get, employed, essentially with the device as it is deployed in that organization. But there is a lot of other checklists, like I said, Wi-Fi, MDM, PBX connectivity is a big piece of that. It's often overlooked. And that's a whole, set of complexity right there to figure out, when you're using iPhones, because the way Apple does push notifications is not like an Android where it can run all the time in the background and you don't need to rely on a push notification service. So the list is pretty long, and you really have to have someone that has really strong understanding in helping you roll these devices out. Because oftentimes the IT companies, they sell you the hardware, and the rest is on you to figure out. So do you have the right clinical, technology teams in your organization to do it?
So you're talking kind of readiness. Are you ready? And I guess a pitch for your firm, Cirkel is in a position, or companies like Cirkel, to assess readiness and to help the customer think ahead about those things. Because one of the things that I'm seeing is that all of a sudden a decision has been made regarding a platform, and then all of the other things that are needed to sustain and maintain that have not necessarily been thought through.
Right. Yeah. Organizations don't really have the critical infrastructure, in place to get these devices online the way they think they can quickly. They're moving off of the cordless phones, and it becomes, as in your guys' business, the alarm and event management notification technologies, those take a while to get on the devices. It's not easy because, how do you get them to the device? How do you make sure the staff assignments are correct in who they go to? There's a lot of pieces moving, in that rollout. So my firm works primarily with organizations on kind of that infrastructure piece, making sure that the critical infrastructure is in place, as well as, how do you select, these different technologies that you're going to roll out inside of your clinical enterprise.
So let's go back to the other road I suggested. So customer is not going iPhone. They're going to go with a purpose-built device from a Zebra or a Spectralink or an ASCOM for that matter. That's not just a slam dunk out of the box either, right? So there are things regarding those platforms, or even CC&C providers who would provide services to those platforms. So what are some of the things those folks need to think about, or are they the same as those iPhone considerations?
It's very similar. The only nuance difference is the push notification services that you have to worry about with Apple. And one thing to put a pin in that often gets overlooked is the complexity around, deploying enterprise voice communication inside the organization. So and why I kind of hone in on that is, if you're going to move from, ASCOM or some cordless phone technology that you're currently on to a smartphone device, you have to figure out how do you get the telephone calling capability into the device so it works within the enterprise. And that, can come from a variety of different applications. Some organizations have a preference towards Cisco and their technologies. Some have a preference toward even using Microsoft Teams as the phone calling solution. And there's maybe even a hybridized approach where they use, applications from CC&C companies who have, phone calling capabilities in the product. They have to support the push notification, to get that into the device, because it's different, the way that works than a cordless phone. So on the Android side of the house, it's a lot simpler because they're not, supporting push notifications and getting, those services to the device. So it is simpler to roll out the Android devices in that regard, but there are still the complexities around, infrastructure, mobile device management solutions, Wi-Fi infrastructure to support these things. So there's a few little differences, but it's largely the same thing.
Well, best practice is best practice. Kind of know what you got, know your deficiencies, line yourself up with the folks who can help you figure out what's the best steps to move forward with and to walk through the process.
Well, best practices is like a Bible, who's really, what version are you reading there? Because everyone has a different best practice, so that's kind of the other challenge too. Because, when you're lining up your technologies, one vendor from another says, well, these are our best practices. And it's like, no, we can't do that because it doesn't meet this best practice we have. So it becomes this infighting in the organization around, okay, how do we cross this bridge together here?
So let me throw you a question that we didn't discuss before. It won't be too obtuse. The desire on the part of the deployers of smartphones, especially in an EMR context, is to have as much of a single pane of glass as they could possibly have. So let's just talk about Epic. So can Epic do it all? And what are the shortcomings of Epic from a collaboration communication standpoint?
Epic has a lot of things in the market. I mean, they're moving in the direction of a lot of different pieces for the workflow that's inside of the organizations. One thing that they don't have really figured out well, and rumor has it that they're coming out with some voice calling capabilities in their app. That's a key piece of their missing inside of their solution at the moment, that fills kind of the gap of everything on the device. The kind of the other problem you have is, you're fighting with real estate on the mobile device that the nurses are carrying, as well as clinical, people that are doing PCT, like EVS, what have you. Those applications that they have on the device, how do you consolidate these applications down to where you only have 2 or 3 applications, and or like the shortcuts on the device? I was most recently at the Zebra event, and I got the pleasure to see some of their new technologies that they were rolling out, with, being able to, tap a badge on the back of the device. And what I'm referring to there is, the Imprivata technology. So they tap this badge, it loads this profile on the device. It has the right clinical applications, for the end user. If it's Epic, it has all the Epic applications, all the Epic shortcuts, and all the telephone extensions on the device ready to go for the end user. So they don't have to come in and, well, I have to sign into this application, or, I call it swivel chairing. I have to go into this application to go to that application to be able to look this up. So they're trying to take that clinical, that cognitive overload that people talk about in the industry, in solving that. They're really trying to help solve that. And I thought it was very impressive what I saw.
So what makes a company like Zebra be a little bit different is that they're just not purely in the device business. So what appears to be happening is that there's missing aspects to glue this properly into the healthcare enterprise. So you're giving an example of this hybrid of platform and devices that
Yeah.
are built to do the kind of thing that you're describing, which is to not just have a consumer device, to have a device that supports the worker's function inside the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, like, look, you want to make it simple for people to use the device. They have enough on their plate as it is, and they people can tout statistics about, um, staffing shortages and whatnot. And I don't have those statistics firsthand, but they say that there is a staffing shortage. So the last thing you want to do is burden your end users with having to figure out new technology and how to leverage and navigate that.
So one of the things about healthcare is that it has a complex web of contemporary, the most up-to-date technologies, but every healthcare organization has, as our friend Brian likes to refer to, the accidental architecture, whereby
Yeah.
things happen over time, and there is this web of old, new, somewhat new, older, and the enterprise managers are tasked with how to figure out how to keep the old stuff going for as long as it needs to keep going, and make it work alongside the new stuff, because rarely do they have the luxury to just start from scratch. One of the places that plays out in our universe is with alarms and notifications from medical devices and from systems like nurse call and physiological monitoring. Uh, so what are you seeing out there in their regard? What challenges are people facing, and what are some things that people should be thinking about as they try to bring all these things together in the new world?
Yeah, I think, one thing that I was thinking about when you were um, talking was, working for a lot of different organizations over the years. They have a tendency of coming in and saying, hey, we want to be able to go system enterprise wide. Well, that does not always work because, there's going to be, different departmental solutions, and you try to solve that and say, hey, like we can help you fix those challenges, which they can, which is fantastic, but it's also challenging for organizations to say, hey, we're gonna move everything over to the solution lock, stock, and barrel. It really doesn't happen. There'll still be a department that has Vocera, for example, in the organization that you pry the badges out of their hands, you're you got another problem on your hands. So there's that piece to it. But I also think, as far as evolution goes, it really comes down to, looking at like all the different technologies that you're using across these systems. Nurse call, who are you using for messaging? What telephony technology, what network technology that you have, in your organization, and kind of building this map and laying out, hey, strategically, who do we have where, what could we consolidate and get rid of? And then how can we modernize and get things to the cloud? So organizations are right now saddled with, how do we do this hybrid approach? It's interesting, a lot of organizations have said we're going to go to Azure over AWS, and but how do you really navigate that? And you really need to build that map, to figure out, what technologies can be hybridized, as well as, what can you consolidate? Because there's a lot of articles out there on, vendor consolidation. It tends to be a big thing at the moment because, like our dear friend Brian likes to say, there's always a vendor there to sell you something. And, there's a lot of vendors that play in these organizations that, really probably could get knocked down to a few if you think about it strategically.
So there's a lot of risk in deployments. The expense literally of introducing devices can be significant, and the disruption by sort of forklifting a working workflow into something else is not anything anybody could it's not trivial. So what are some of the things, just to kind of wrap here, that all customers should be thinking about as they think about the new enterprise that has a significant amount of mobile devices, many of them in the smartphone form factor?
I think where does those devices live in life cycle? Because I think it was device du jour, as I like to joke and call it. It was what technology fit for the moment, and how do you get consolidated down to like one single solution that fits across the organization. So if you're on iPhones in some areas and, certain flavors of Android in another, whether that be, from the Honeywell Zebra Spectralink category that are purpose built, is there a device that you can consolidate, down to that's going to provide you the management capabilities that your organization needs? Like one thing that we didn't touch on, I think is just really key is, when you roll out these devices and you're looking at, how do you put them into the enterprise? It's back to that single pane of glass. How do we operationalize these things so that you can look at them and in a single pane of glass and manage them easily? So that's a big factor in that. And then, your network, who are your system integrators that are helping you? Can they help, take you to the next, level, like cloud, hybrid cloud, what have you? Does that even exist? So, I think those are kind of the key points that that I think are crucial, from the device and the management side. But I think also on the operational side is, you know, that map that I discussed. Who's where, what are you using? Is there a way to consolidate? If you look at the workflows, is there a lot of workflow optimization that you can do in your organization around these key technologies?
Yeah, and I would say too that organizations can get help. So, and they can get
They
help
can.
with people who are not generalists that have specific experience in the healthcare universe, because the type of integrations that we're talking about, especially if we're involving medical devices and other type of infrastructure technology, they're just different in healthcare and have their unique requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we live in a time where people want bespoke. I mean, the integrations that you have may be different. I mean, may came all come off of like one epic system you have, but you might want to have a customized dashboard that has information on that's specific to you and the way you run your organization, and maybe you want to push the envelope and be very innovative and come up with new things. So there's a lot of different angles out there that, there's subject matter experts to help. It's just a matter of, does the budget exist?
For sure. So, Cirkel, your company, is in business to help hospital customers amongst other verticals. Give a pitch for yourself and tell people how they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kenny. So, Circle, I started a consulting group, that has spatiality and, myself, I've been around network technologies, worked for some of the bigger providers over the years on the network side, and then got involved in healthcare, deep on, integrations and alarm management. And, we're working with health systems primarily about, how do you navigate this digital journey ahead? And then also working with companies on, the productization, in kind of the comm services space. So we're covering both areas. We have a website. It's www.cirkel, and that's cirkelco.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So love to have a conversation. If anyone wants to find me on the digital channels, I'm there.
So thanks, Myron. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Kenny. Appreciate your time.
And thanks everybody for joining us on Care Points. I encourage you to hit the like button and subscribe so you can find out when there are new episodes coming. And if you want to check back at our episode archive, you can go to www.lonestarcom.com/podcast. That's www.lonestarcom.com/podcast. Thanks for listening.